Jailhouse Confession, he wrote, "I had real roast beef and pork sandwiches. They were very good. The human body tastes very similar to pork."
In the annals of criminal history, few figures are as chilling and enigmatic as Joseph Roy Metheny. His story, marked by brutal crimes that defy comprehension, stands as a macabre testament to the darkest corners of human nature. This video delves into the life and actions of Metheny, a man who allegedly transformed his victims into something as mundane and unsuspecting as hamburgers, blurring the lines between reality and the grotesque fabrications of a disturbed mind. As we unravel the layers of this complex and horrifying case, we confront not only the stark reality of Metheny's deeds, but also the unsettling questions they raise about the human psyche.
The human body tastes very similar to pork. If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference.
Early life and background. Joseph Roy Metheny's life story, much like the macabre tales that surrounded his later years, began under shadowed circumstances, painting a picture of a troubled childhood that might have set the stage for his future actions. Born on March 2, 1955 in Baltimore, Maryland, Metheny's entry into the world was unremarkable, but his early years quickly devolved into a tableau of neglect and familial dysfunction, elements often found in the backstories of many who later turned to crime. Metheny was the product of a large family with 6 siblings, where neglect was a common thread due to the challenges his parents faced. His father, plagued by alcoholism, squandered the family's meager resources on his addiction, leaving little for the care and upbringing of the children. This addiction not only drained the family's finances, but also created an environment of instability and emotional turmoil. Metheny's mother, grappling with the financial strain, was forced to work tirelessly, often taking double shifts as a waitress and a food truck driver to make ends meet. This situation left the children, including young Joseph, largely to fend for themselves. Tragedy struck early in Metheny's life when, at the tender age of 6, he lost his father to an automobile accident. This event plunged the family further into chaos. The loss of the patriarch, despite his flaws, meant the loss of a figure that held the family together, however tenuously. Metheny's mother, now a single parent, struggled even more to provide for her children, and her efforts to keep the family afloat meant that the children often received little attention or guidance. The lack of parental supervision and support during these formative years might have contributed significantly to Metheny's later behavioral issues. As a coping mechanism and perhaps as a means of seeking comfort, young Metheny turned to food, leading to an early onset of obesity. This physical condition became a defining aspect of his identity and possibly a source of mockery and social isolation during his childhood and adolescence. The emotional impact of such experiences can be profound, particularly in young, impressionable minds, and can sometimes contribute to a trajectory toward antisocial behavior. During his teenage years, Metheny's situation did not improve. With his mother overwhelmed and unable to provide adequate care, he and his siblings were periodically sent to live with other families under the foster care system. This system, designed to provide safe and temporary care for children in distressing situations, became a revolving door for Metheny. The instability and lack of a consistent, nurturing environment may have further compounded his sense of alienation and abandonment. The experience of living in foster care, moving from one temporary home to another, often leaves children feeling unwanted and unloved, emotions that can have long-lasting psychological effects. As Metheny transitioned into adulthood, his troubled past seemed to follow him. At 18, he claimed to have joined the United States Army, serving in Germany during a critical phase of his life. It was during this period that Metheny's behavioral patterns began to show more ominous signs. He developed an addiction to drugs, a habit that not only altered his behavior, but also set him on a path of escalating problems. The transformation from a neglected child to a drug-addicted adult marked a significant deterioration in his life trajectory. His mother, observing her son's decline from afar, could do little but witness the disintegration of the family unit and the descent of her son into a life of addiction and instability. Metheny's foray into drug abuse and its accompanying lifestyle choices mirrored, in a tragic twist, the path of his father. This resemblance to his father's destructive lifestyle could suggest a cycle of dysfunction and despair that Metheny could not escape. The combination of his upbringing in a neglected, impoverished environment, his struggle with obesity and social isolation, and his descent into substance abuse created a potent mix of factors that likely influenced his psychological development and behavioral patterns. The early life of Joseph Roy Metheny, characterized by neglect, loss, and instability, offers a somber backdrop to the heinous crimes he would later commit. Understanding this backdrop is crucial in piecing together the puzzle of his life, a life that veered so dramatically off course, leading to acts of unimaginable horror. It's a narrative that forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth about how the fractures of childhood can sometimes foreshadow a future mired in darkness and tragedy. Descent into criminality. Joseph Roy Metheny's path from a troubled youth to a criminal figure is a harrowing tale of how a confluence of personal misfortunes and societal failures can push an individual towards a life of crime. Metheny's descent into criminality did not occur overnight. It was a gradual progression marked by a series of events and choices that increasingly alienated him from society and nudged him towards the margins where criminality thrived. After his stint in the military, Metheny returned to Baltimore, a changed man. His time in the army, rather than providing a structured environment that could have helped him straighten out his life, ended up exacerbating his problems. The drug addiction he developed during his service persisted, and Metheny found himself drawn into the city's underground world where drugs were a currency and lawlessness was the norm. His large, imposing frame, Metheny stood at 6 feet, 1 inch tall, and weighed over 330 pounds, made him an intimidating presence, a trait that served him well in the rough and tumble environment he now frequented. The early signs of his criminal behavior were relatively minor: petty thefts, minor scuffles, and drug offenses. However, these were indicative of a deeper malaise. Metheny's drug addiction not only kept him tethered to the criminal underworld, but it also further estranged him from any semblance of a normal life. He frequented bars and associated with people who lived on the fringes of society, often those without homes, forming makeshift encampments in the less savory parts of Baltimore. It was in these settings that Metheny's criminal tendencies began to take a more sinister turn. The turning point in Metheny's descent into severe criminality can be traced back to a series of personal tragedies that seemed to unleash something dark and violent within him. The catalyst was the dissolution of his relationship with his wife and the subsequent loss of his child. His wife, struggling with her own drug addiction, left Metheny, taking their 6-year-old son with her. The devastation Metheny felt was profound and was compounded when he learned that his son had been placed in the care of the state due to his wife's negligence and drug abuse. Consumed by rage and a sense of helplessness, Metheny embarked on a vengeful hunt for his wife and her new partner. It was during this period that his criminal activities escalated dramatically. He roamed the streets, fueled by a toxic mix of anger, drugs, and a burning desire for retribution. His quest led him to the underbelly of Baltimore, where he came across people he believed were responsible for his plight. In a fit of rage, Metheny committed his first known murders, targeting homeless individuals who he felt epitomized the degradation of his life. These initial acts of violence marked a significant shift in Metheny's criminal trajectory. What started as a personal vendetta soon morphed into a series of senseless killings that seemed to provide Metheny with a perverse sense of control and power. The nature of these crimes was brutal and unprovoked, indicating a complete detachment from societal norms and a descent into psychopathy. As Metheny's criminal activities grew in severity, so did his notoriety. He became a feared figure in the circles he operated in, known for his unpredictable and violent behavior. His physical appearance, combined with his reputation, made him a formidable and terrifying presence. The murders he committed during this period were characterized by a chilling lack of remorse and a brutal efficiency that pointed to a complete moral breakdown. The murders and modus operandi. The heinous crimes committed by Joseph Roy Metheny not only shocked the community for their brutality, but also raised profound questions about the nature of evil and the depths of human depravity. Metheny's murders, characterized by their gruesome nature and chilling methodical approach, marked him as one of the most notorious killers in the annals of American criminal history. Metheny's murderous spree seems to have been triggered by the loss of his son and the subsequent breakdown of his marriage. Consumed by rage, he embarked on a search for his estranged wife and her new partner, a search that led him into the darker corners of Baltimore and eventually to his first victims. According to his later confessions, Metheny's first act of murder was more an impulsive burst of violence rather than a premeditated act. He encountered two homeless people sleeping under a bridge and, in a fit of rage, killed them both. These first killings seemed to unleash a dormant predatory instinct in Metheny, setting him on a path of bloodshed and horror. His modus operandi evolved over time, becoming more calculated and sinister. Metheny used his job at a pallet manufacturing company to his advantage, turning the secluded area around his workplace into his hunting ground. He would lure his victims to this isolated location, often with the promise of drugs or alcohol. Once there, they were at his mercy, far from help and unable to escape. Metheny's physical size and strength made it easy for him to overpower his victims, who were often vulnerable individuals from the fringes of society, drug addicts, the homeless, or those simply too trusting. The murders were marked by a brutal efficiency. Metheny often strangled or stabbed his victims, showing a preference for methods that provided a quick and sure result. The disposal of the bodies was equally cold-blooded. He buried some of his victims in shallow graves near his workplace, while others were dismembered, with parts allegedly used in a macabre and horrifying manner. The most infamous aspect of Metheny's crimes, and the one that garnered the most media attention, was his claim that he had turned some of his victims into hamburgers. According to his own account, Metheny mixed the flesh of his victims with pork and beef to sell as hamburgers from a small stand he set up. This grotesque detail, whether true or a figment of Metheny's twisted imagination, added a layer of horror to the crimes and left an indelible mark on the public psyche. Metheny's choice of victims was not random. He targeted those he perceived as weak or vulnerable, those least likely to be missed or searched for. This predatory selection of victims speaks to a disturbing understanding on Metheny's part of how society often overlooks the marginalized. His ability to continue his killing spree for as long as he did without detection is a testament to the invisibility of his victims in the eyes of society. The brutal nature of the murders, the methodical approach in their execution, and the cold-blooded disposal of the bodies reveal a man who had not only lost all empathy for his fellow human beings, but had also developed a perverse satisfaction in the act of killing. Metheny's actions were those of a predator in the truest sense, seeing his victims not as human beings but as objects to satisfy his bloodlust. The hamburger story: truth or myth? Among the many horrifying aspects of Joseph Roy Metheny's crimes, perhaps the most chilling and macabre is the claim that he turned his victims into hamburgers and sold them to unsuspecting customers. This allegation, a grotesque blend of cannibalism and entrepreneurial criminality, has become a central part of the Metheny mythos. But the question remains, was this claim a grim reality or just a part of Metheny's fabricated stories designed to enhance his notoriety? Metheny himself was the source of these claims. During his confessions, he detailed how he mixed the flesh of his victims with pork and beef, selling these gruesome concoctions as hamburgers from a small stand. This statement instantly captured the public's imagination and horror, painting Metheny as not just a murderer, but a cannibal who involved the public in his twisted fantasies. However, the veracity of these claims has been a subject of intense debate. Firstly, there's the issue of evidence. While Metheny was indeed convicted of multiple murders, there was no direct physical evidence linking the remains of his victims to the hamburgers he claimed to have made and sold. Metheny's confessions, while detailed, lacked corroborating evidence. No remains of his alleged victims were found in the vicinity of his supposed burger stand, nor were there traces of human DNA in any of the samples that could be tested from the area. This lack of physical evidence raises questions about whether Metheny's claims were grounded in reality or were a morbid fabrication. Psychological analyses of Metheny provide some insight into his propensity for exaggeration and attention-seeking behavior. It's possible that Metheny, aware of the notoriety and shock his case had generated, embellished or invented aspects of his story to maintain and enhance his infamy. Serial killers often have a desire for recognition and may exaggerate or fabricate elements of their crimes to seem more fearsome or to gain attention. Metheny's detailed and sensational claim about turning his victims into hamburgers fits this pattern of behavior, suggesting a possible motive for lying. On the other hand, the very nature of Metheny's crimes and his lifestyle lends a certain disturbing plausibility to his claims. His job at the pallet company provided him with a secluded area to carry out his murders and dispose of the bodies. The location was isolated, and Metheny had ample opportunity to engage in such gruesome activities without immediate detection. His choice of victims, often individuals on the fringes of society whose disappearance might go unnoticed, further adds to the feasibility of his claim. The public reaction to Metheny's claim was one of horror and disbelief. The thought that they might have unknowingly consumed human flesh deeply disturbed many and left a lasting impact on the community. This reaction might have provided Metheny with a sense of power and control, further incentivizing him to perpetuate this narrative. Arrest, trial, and confessions. The saga of Joseph Roy Metheny's heinous crimes eventually culminated in his arrest, trial, and a series of confessions that shed light on his twisted psyche, while simultaneously casting shadows of doubt on the veracity of some of his claims. Metheny's apprehension and subsequent legal proceedings added complex layers to a case already steeped in horror and ambiguity. Metheny's arrest was a direct consequence of his own reckless boldness. In December 1996, his attempt to abduct and murder another victim, Rita Kemper, failed when she managed to escape and alert the authorities. Kemper's harrowing escape and desperate plea for help led the police directly to Metheny. When the police arrived at the pallet company where Metheny worked and lived, they found evidence of his gruesome activities, including the makeshift grave of Kimberly Spicer, one of his victims. Metheny's trial was a spectacle that gripped the nation. Charged with multiple counts of murder, the weight of his crimes was immense. During the proceedings, the grisly details of his actions were laid bare, painting a picture of a man devoid of remorse and humanity. Metheny, for his part, seemed almost indifferent to the proceedings, showing little emotion as the testimonies and evidence against him were presented. The most chilling part of the trial was Metheny's own confessions. He openly admitted to the murders, recounting the details with a disturbing level of candor. His descriptions of the crimes were graphic and detailed, lacking any sense of remorse or empathy for his victims. In these confessions, Metheny also reiterated his claim about turning his victims into hamburgers and selling them, a detail that added a grotesque dimension to the already horrific nature of his crimes. However, the truthfulness of Metheny's statements was a subject of much debate. While there was no doubt about his guilt in the murders, the physical evidence and his own admissions were indisputable in that regard. The veracity of his more sensational claims, particularly about the hamburgers, was less clear. Some experts suggested that these claims were exaggerations or fabrications, a way for Metheny to gain notoriety or to shock the public and the jury. This perspective was supported by the lack of physical evidence to substantiate these specific claims. The defense strategy in Metheny's trial was not centered on proving his innocence. The evidence against him was overwhelming, but rather on trying to avoid the death penalty. They argued that Metheny's life, marked by neglect, abuse, and addiction, had led him down the path of violence, and that his actions, while unforgivable, were the results of a life filled with trauma and psychological damage. Ultimately, Metheny was found guilty of multiple counts of murder. The jury, however, was not unanimous in recommending the death penalty, resulting in Metheny receiving a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This sentence meant Metheny would spend the rest of his life behind bars, a fate that seemed to leave him unfazed. Psychological analysis. The crimes committed by Joseph Roy Metheny present a perplexing and horrifying case study for criminal psychologists and experts in the field of mental health. To unravel the psychological underpinnings of Metheny's actions, one must delve into the myriad factors that shaped his psyche, including his childhood, personal experiences, and possible mental health disorders. Metheny's early life, marked by neglect, abuse, and instability, undoubtedly played a significant role in his psychological development. The impact of such a tumultuous childhood cannot be overstated. It often leads to long-term psychological damage. Children who grow up in environments devoid of love and stability may develop attachment disorders, making it difficult for them to form healthy relationships in adulthood. Moreover, the trauma of losing a parent at a young age and the subsequent upheaval can trigger a host of emotional and behavioral issues. The onset of Metheny's criminal behavior coincided with a period in his life when he was grappling with significant personal challenges, including his struggle with drug addiction and the breakdown of his marriage. Addiction not only alters brain chemistry, but also impacts judgment, decision-making, and impulse control. The combination of Metheny's traumatic past and his drug abuse could have created a volatile mix, driving him towards increasingly destructive behavior. Psychologists often point to a variety of personality disorders when analyzing serial killers. While it is difficult to diagnose posthumously, some of Metheny's behaviors suggest possible antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. Individuals with ASPD often exhibit a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. They may engage in deceitful, manipulative, and impulsive behavior and often lack remorse for their actions. Metheny's lack of empathy for his victims, his manipulative tendencies, and his apparent lack of remorse are consistent with some of the key features of ASPD. Moreover, Metheny's methodical approach to killing, his meticulous planning, and the specific nature of his crimes indicate a level of organization that is often seen in psychopathic individuals. Psychopathy, a more severe form of ASPD, is characterized by a profound lack of empathy, superficial charm, and a grandiose sense of self-worth. Psychopaths are adept at mimicking emotions and manipulating others, skills that Metheny seemed to possess. His ability to lure victims, his manipulation of the truth, and his lack of genuine emotional connection suggest psychopathic traits. Another aspect worth considering is Metheny's possible enjoyment of power and control, a common motive among serial killers. His choice of vulnerable victims and the nature of his crimes suggest a desire to exert dominance and control. This need for power could stem from feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy experienced in his early life, leading him to seek control in the most heinous way possible. Legacy and impact on criminal justice. The case of Joseph Roy Metheny, fraught with brutality and a disregard for human life, has left a lasting impact on the criminal justice system, law enforcement methodologies, and public perception of violent crimes. The investigation, trial, and subsequent analysis of Metheny's actions provide valuable insights into the handling of serial murder cases and the broader implications for society. One of the most significant impacts of Metheny's case on criminal justice has been the spotlight it shone on the treatment of marginalized victims. Metheny's choice of victims, often individuals living on the societal fringe, such as the homeless or drug addicts, highlighted a troubling aspect of criminal investigations. These populations, frequently overlooked or given less priority in crime investigations, are particularly vulnerable to becoming targets of serial predators. Metheny's ability to evade early detection and arrest for his crimes underscored the need for law enforcement to pay equal attention to crimes involving all societal groups, regardless of their social status or lifestyle. The case also brought to the forefront the importance of psychological profiling in criminal investigations. Metheny's patterns of behavior, choice of victims, and methods provided critical insights that helped in understanding not only his psyche, but also in developing profiles for similar offenders. This has reinforced the value of psychological profiling in serial murder investigations, aiding law enforcement in identifying patterns and anticipating potential future actions of serial offenders. Furthermore, Metheny's case underscored the challenges in managing and rehabilitating individuals with a history of severe substance abuse and mental health issues. The intersection of Metheny's drug addiction, mental health problems, and criminal behavior highlighted the need for more effective intervention and support systems for individuals with similar backgrounds. This realization has implications for the criminal justice system's approach to rehabilitation, emphasizing the need for addressing underlying issues such as substance abuse and mental health disorders as part of the rehabilitation process. In terms of law enforcement approaches, the Metheny case has emphasized the need for enhanced investigative techniques, especially in cases involving serial killings. The use of advanced forensic methods, DNA analysis, and cross-jurisdictional cooperation became even more critical in the wake of this case. Metheny's ability to operate undetected for an extended period highlighted the importance of these tools in tracking and apprehending serial offenders. Public perception of crimes of this nature was also significantly affected by Metheny's actions. The gruesome details of his murders, particularly the allegations of cannibalism, captured public attention and horror, leading to a heightened awareness and fear of such crimes. This has led to a more vigilant and informed public, more aware of the signs of predatory behavior and the potential dangers posed by individuals like Metheny. However, it also fueled sensationalism in media coverage of such crimes, sometimes leading to misinformation and panic. The Metheny case also had legal implications, particularly in the realm of the death penalty debate. The decision to sentence Metheny to life imprisonment despite the gravity of his crimes contributed to ongoing discussions about the application of the death penalty in murder cases. It raised questions about the criteria for imposing the death penalty and the role of mitigating factors, such as Metheny's troubled background and mental health issues, in determining sentencing.